Great. Well, welcome everyone. We've got people still joining in the waiting room, but I'll let them in as we go. But wanted to get started and welcome back to our virtual coffee chats. Took a few weeks off for the summer, but it's great to get started again and to have Brent and Rita here to help kick it off. As we were just kind of chatting beforehand, everything is full on now that Labor Day's happened. Everybody's kind of back in that back to work mode and really starting to do their planning for the fall into next year. And Brent and Rita both have some fantastic experience and great insight into bringing live events back online this year. They both have a couple of events coming up in the next month and a half, 2 months for both of you, and then some larger events into the new year. So it'll be fantastic to hear their insight and hear some of the challenges and new planning that's going on for that. But before we get started, just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with Zoom. If you haven't used it before, in the top right of your screen, there's an opportunity for you to change the view. You can either see a panel of everyone who's on the call, or you can just see the speakers. You can toggle back and forth from there. If you go to the bottom, there's a chat window. Feel free to type in any questions here. Let's do that. So you can feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we'll bring those into the conversation. This is really a chat just between Brent, Rita, myself, and everyone who's on the call. So if you've got some thoughts or some questions and you want to turn on your mic and turn on your camera, happy to have you jump in and make this an open dialogue. So just before we get started on that, I wanted to let everybody know that our next session is on September 23rd, and we've got Invest Ottawa, RBC, and Logan Katz talking about investing in economic development and entrepreneurial development out of the Ottawa and Eastern Ontario region, but looking at how that applies across different regions in the country. So it'll be a great session, and we'll send out the link to register that in the follow-up to this session. But before I get too much on my end, let me introduce Rita, and then I'll introduce Brent. Or I'll let Rita introduce herself, sorry.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be with you. My name is Rita Plaskett. I am a meeting planner. I own my own conference event management company called Agendum, and I'm in Toronto. I have been in the meeting planning industry for over 30 years with CMPs and CMM, DES, a lot of certifications that we acquire along the way. I have had my own organization for the last 17 years now, and prior to that I was in corporate Canada as well as in the association field. I also taught hospitality at George Brown College for about 10 years. So, and I'm thrilled to be here with you, and hopefully looking forward to some great conversations.
Great, thanks Rita. And Brent, do you want to introduce yourself?
You bet. I'm Brent Taylor. It's awesome being here. I'm thrilled to be chatting with all of you and to talk about events and sponsorship. My background, I think I've been in the industry 27 years. At 1993, we started Timewise Event Management in 1999, and then a subsidiary of Timewise, which is a boutique AV company, Event Technology Solutions, in 2011. I'm heavily involved in the events industry, have been for about 15 years now. Beyond our business, currently I'm on the international board of directors with Meeting Professionals International, which is globally the largest organization or a professional association. We manage, and then our connection with sponsorship, obviously we do it for all our events, but we do produce the Western Sponsorship Congress Alberta Forum. And then for the events industry, we do the Calgary Event Awards, Edmonton Event Awards, and also our big signature event for the events industry, which is Go West, which is held in Western Canada, and that attracts people in from all over.
Great, thanks, Brent. Yeah, so really, everybody's been through this big challenge over the last 6 months. From the pair of you, how has it impacted what you've been doing and the planning moving forward?
I can start if you like. It's been a ride. I think that the shock at first, and I'm sure Brent will probably say the same thing, that the shock at first was a little bit daunting, and also there was a lot, at least I felt for me, there was a lot of, well, this not this too shall pass, but that within 6 months from now, so look at where we are today, we would be in a different place, and everyone hoped that life would go back or to some form of what we used to call normal, and now 6 months later, here we are, and this is our new normal. And so looking at everyone through my laptop is my new meeting room, and it seems that that's everyone's new meeting room. I think also too, the challenges that we faced initially in the beginning was the undoing of all the work that we had done and all the programs that were either being relocated to other dates, times, years, or being canceled. And then once we did get past that phase, then we went into the fact that this looked like it was going to last for quite a while now. So we needed to then start to deliver content and bring people together. So that's when the virtual world starts to become the most important thing that you start working on from that point forward. So those are some of the steps that I came across as I went through these last 6 months.
Yeah, I think you nailed it when you used the word shocked. Yeah, absolutely. Like it came with a shock. Who would have thought that 6 months or 5 to 6 months later that we would still be sitting in pretty much a shutdown mode?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that works in events knows that our industry has been completely or is being decimated. We're 90 to 100% shut down. We're first one shut down, and we're going to be the last ones back activated. And the whole when you add uncertainty to all that, where does that leave us? And it's been really positive to see going into the fall here, planners and people that produce and host events just being so innovative and figuring out how to work within the parameters of what we have to work within, the government mandates, with health authorities mandate to work within those parameters to actually host events. And but on a personal level, I have to say, I've got 4 kids, and I think this summer it's been great being able to focus on them, but because there wasn't a lot for them to do, so we're doing a lot more camping, etc. But I look at that, the young people as a whole, and I just like trying to navigate them through this pandemic, because we've got this, they're being bombarded in social media and media with this message that the world's falling apart and that everything, there's no future in the near term, and just helping the kids work their way through that's been a bit of a challenge too. So I guess both with work and personally, it's been tough.
Yeah, but I imagine working clients through the process too of just trying to figure out what they can and can't do. I know you've got an event coming up in November, as do you, Rita. And Rita, you've got an event out of province, but I think you're running multiple events across different provinces. So you've got some interesting challenges there. You've got the WSC coming up in November, Brent. But what other activities are you rolling out?
Yeah, we're Alberta based. We're in Alberta here. We're allowed 100 people for conference. They are required to be masked and 6 feet apart. So the meeting spaces look pretty interesting when you have theater seating with a chair every 6 feet. But it's happening. Yes, and we do have Western Sponsorship Congress happening. It's been interesting because there's so much uncertainty around everything, that I think a lot of organizations are being hesitant to actually move ahead. So they keep postponing and putting off their events. And it's like, you have to look at it at the perspective of somebody has to be first. And we made that decision to move ahead with Western Sponsorship Congress in Alberta Forum, which is going to be held November 25th and 26th. We decided to move ahead back in I think it sales registration went on, or we opened registration back in June. And we're trying to be first, or we took that step. We're one of the first to start doing a significant event. Obviously we're capped at 100 people, but we're going to do it. And interestingly enough, we haven't had a lot of we haven't seen a decline in the amount of people that are registering. Like, it's pacing the same as in prior years.
Well, that's encouraging.
Very, very encouraging, actually.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. I have an event, a live event in Calgary, actually, in the beginning of November, and 100 people, again, social distanced. This is an event that would have been held in April here in Toronto for about 400 people. And so it's interesting, now it's capped at 100 people. So there'll be a blend, a hybrid component of it, obviously, for the 300 people or so that will not be able to participate. But did have to look at it in a different lens than all the years that I've done this event before. This particular one is an awards event. And it was a black tie, wonderful event at the Ritz-Carlton, obviously very social, with the awards culminating with the awards. But the attention span for an evening on a Zoom or some other platform is not the same as being live. And so to benefit those that will be hybrid, who'll be watching virtually and not there for the actual meal portion and just the celebration and the awards, we're going to add a roundtable discussion, inviting CFOs of top organizations in Canada, Air Canada, Cineplex, who talking about what their life has been like for the last 6 months and how they've had to maneuver through the landmines that they've had to deal with. As we all know, Cineplex, Air Canada have had a lot of challenges. So that component, I think a lot of people will find very interesting. And we've never added any kind of component like that within it. It was strictly a lovely black tie celebration and an honor of an award winner. But you have to look at it from the viewpoint of the audience that are calling in. They're not benefiting from that wonderful evening later on with the dinner. So, try to find ways to have them enjoy their experience as well, rather than just watch the award winner receive an award.
And then, what are some of the challenges you guys have both seen for, running a big event like that, and then for Brent, with you running a conference where people are going to be networking, there's going to be breakouts and different plenaries. Are you having a challenge with people registering? Are you having problems with your actual speakers showing up?
Yeah, I think, one thing we've noticed with our trying to develop our program out, speakers, whoever we asked, when we ask people to speak, they're saying, yes, we want to be there. But especially out of province, we're finding that the corporations are putting a no travel policy in place, so they cannot travel here to participate. So it's a bit of a challenge, and that's the same. I'm sure that's the same for a lot of the people that would want to register and attend. We have somebody, from Charlottetown that registered for our Western Sponsorship Congress, and she's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it, but I'm coming. What's your policy if I can't make it? So we had to develop a no risk registration policy that, hey, up until a week prior or 2 weeks prior, if we can refund you for no reason. And I think that's what with events that we have to do is to look at it. How do we work with the attendees? On the venue side of things, what's been very interesting, because obviously, the venues are challenged hugely on trying to accommodate events. And, our event's being held at the Fantasyland Hotel at West Edmonton Mall. And I can tell you, like, these hotels and venues are working overtime to figure out how to make it work, what kind of policies they need, what parameters are they going to work within. They've been absolutely fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I would echo that. And I had such positive experiences when I was canceling and rescheduling so many events. Within 2 weeks, I had canceled 12 events just within the first 2 weeks. And they were, most places were so accommodating. They really wanted to be your partner through this process. And I've also discovered that, as an example, I'm doing a big conference in June in Quebec City. And so as I reached out to the convention center in Quebec City just recently to discuss what my options are and the deposits that are due, and I made the ask to withhold any deposits on anything until the new year so that we can have a chance to see what happens over the course of the fall, whether we have another surge or, you know, who knows? We don't have a crystal ball. So everyone accommodating, absolutely no penalties, you know, just they want us back as much as we want to be there, and so they're prepared to meet us halfway. And that's just probably the most reassuring thing. Our business is about people, and to work with people who are like that, who don't make it more challenging than it needs to be, and who are partnered with you all the way through, makes you want to go back to those destinations and those hotels and those properties, and, you know, do everything you can to help them fill their buildings as well.
Yeah, we have found venues to be so accommodating, and just you know, if they have, not being hard fast on the dates, because, you know, by contract they could make us you know, pay penalties and not postpone the event or reschedule it. But absolutely, I have not heard of that happening at least locally here or in Alberta. You know, we reschedule for the new year. I think, you know, with events being rescheduled for 2021, 2022, the one issue that is going to arise, though, is going to be the availability of space, because we're going to be compressing all those events that haven't been happening. They're all going to be compressed into that later date, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I'm seeing,
book your event now, book your date now, because you may not get them.
I was just going to say that I'm starting to see that now as I'm trying to book into 2022 and 2023. And if you're booking long range and you want prime time, it's always been a bit of a challenge, which is why if you take an association's experiences, they book so many years out, because everybody wants those, you know, first 2 weeks of June. Like everybody wants the same time, and it is becoming challenging. It is, and they're giving right of first refusal. The ones I'm seeing, a lot of them, right of first refusal for those who had business on the books and had to reschedule. So you're in a holding pattern in a lot of cases. So you are right, Brent. If you are looking into the future, at least try to get a hold on a date. It's going to be quite challenging.
And that's what the venues are telling me is happening, is that they're getting a lot of holds. And so the next step to that is, you know, you put a hold on a date and you're going to end up, that's going to get challenged. You got to be ready to confirm it if need be, because you'll have just a few days to do so.
That's right.
And I guess there's those risk elements. I mean, you're talking about having a no risk registration for your event coming up in November. You know, as an organization, trying to make sure you don't lose money on an event. It's making sure you have all those elements in place, that your venue is going to work with you, your partners are going to work with you, sponsors are going to work with you, and you've got that flexibility back and forth. You know, I've heard some stories about some force majeure plays in the spring that ended up being pretty ugly. So I think it's just positioning yourself and finding the right partners are probably the most important things.
Exactly. I know, you know, it's really about contracts. You know, what's that contract obligate you? You know, for our November 25th, 26th event, like, you know, we assessed, you know, well, starting with the contract, and then there's the financial side. So we looked at the contract and said, you know what, if we got to move this thing, what's the obligations we're going to have? Because if we move the date, we're going to stay in the same venue. So we're asking the venue, what are you going to obligate us to? And what does the contract say we're going to be obligated to? And then we got to look at, you know, if we did move it, what expenses are we going to occur? So something like registrations, like we're doing this, you know, no risk registration. Well, we pay credit card fees when that transaction is processed, you know, of the 3 or 3.5%. And then if we have to refund, we're paying that again. So, you know, there's a 7% charge on every that we will pay if we end up someone registers and then, you know, we have to refund it. So we have to budget for that and figure out, you know, what's that cost? Can we handle it? Can we absorb it if we move the event?
And then where have you seen, you know, sponsors coming into play and their adjustments and different engagements? I know Brent, you've got you know, a big trade show in January, and Rita, you've been working on a live live conference, which is now moved virtual, and then the live conference next year. What's your experience been with the sponsors?
My experience with the sponsors with the live event is a lot, not all of them, but some of the sponsors that were part of some of the events that had to be canceled in the spring still wanted to keep that exposure in front of those particular audiences. And so they were prepared to not expect a refund, but expect to find some other means of getting in front of these audiences. So in those cases, some of them, it was easier to populate some of these events with existing sponsors that we already had who weren't asking for refunds. I came across one yesterday where this organization has been a major financial institution, and they were a major sponsor of a large event that I had been doing for the last 10 years. And they have a no attendance, no sponsorship policy for the rest of this year. So they had to withdraw their 10-year sponsorship of something because their corporate policy will just not allow them to be either sponsoring, to be viewed as sponsoring, or to attend. And so I'm seeing both sides. I'm seeing a little bit more of those that are now that the world is sort of trying to get back to the new normal. They want to be part and be visible because they've also lost money. So, it depends on which type of sponsor you're going after, and obviously the amount of that they'll sponsor. A lot of sponsors are still willing to sponsor, but they just don't have the deep pockets that they may have had 6, 8, 10 months ago. So that also has an impact on our runway and what we can do without a large amount of sponsorship, especially in a virtual, because you certainly can't create the same kind of revenue in registration fees and dues virtually that you can in a live event. And although people say it's a virtual event, it's a lot less expensive, when you really start to do a live virtual event, and you do use some of the great platforms that are out there, all the platform really is just your ballroom. It's just your venue. You still have your production, Brent. You can validate. You still have your production. You still have your audiovisual needs. You still have, your speakers. You still have. There's a lot of expenses that don't. Your marketing. If you're doing a social component to it, some kind of networking. There's finances attached to whatever that looks like as well. So when you step back and you start to build out the budgets for these types of virtual events, it's quite shocking when you first start to do it to realize that they're not that much less expensive than doing it face to face, because you can't recoup revenues that way. And again, for a lot of us, we're building the plane as we're flying it. We've been doing this for 30 some years live. So you certainly hopefully master your craft, and this is the first run at the new mastering of your craft. So it's building the plane while you're flying it as well. So interesting times.
And imagine as a result of that, and looking forward, even if you're going to go to a hybrid with live in person and then offering it virtual, that you're almost doubling your costs.
Mm-hmm. You have your streaming expenses, exactly, that you wouldn't have otherwise. So yes, you're right.
Yeah, the planning that goes in behind on the virtual side is significant. And I think that's a misnomer that people have out there, is that, it's a virtual event. There's no, there's less work, substantially less work, and it's going to cost us. It's going to cost us less. And one of the things that we're finding on our audiovisual side right now is that people are approaching us like 3-4 days out from their event, saying, we want just something simple using Zoom, and this is what we want to do. And I'm like, at 3 days out, 1 week out, how do we begin to get them to understand the amount of prep work that needs to go into that to make their virtual event effective? Mm-hmm. Stepping back to the sponsorship side, on sponsorship on site and engagement, etc. You're right about the dollar amounts. Some companies have just been decimated and don't have the funds. Others are very active. There's lost opportunities. There's new opportunities. The new opportunities now are, you're seeing stuff popping up all around. The protection measures like floor decals, sanitizing stations, masks, etc. It's all brandable. We've lost, probably the most significant area that we've lost lost in though opportunities would be anything revolving around social events. Social events are restricted to 50 people, but how do you hold a mixer or a social aspect to a conference when we have to wear a mask and stand 6 feet apart? So that's one we haven't quite worked that one out yet for our November event. Like how are we going to do that? So we're kind of waiting for closer to the date when we see what the province and the health authority is going to stipulate as far as what we have to do. But when we start picturing this, we're like, how do you wear a mask? How do you stand 6 feet apart and actually connect, with each other? Just on a positive note, or on a really positive note, with Go West, or not Go West, sorry, Western Sponsorship Congress, one of our Go West sponsors, GES, which is the largest show services company globally, we were able to do a deal with them on Western Sponsorship Congress, which they've never been involved with this Congress at all, not even in attendance. And they're coming full-fledged into the sponsorship, and they said, you know what, this is an awesome opportunity, even though it's 80 people or 100 or under 100 people. They're saying we're on board. We want to showcase how we can help you events like yours deal with pandemics. And I thought, you know what, good on them. Like that's a golden opportunity for them to actually show what they can do, starting with the registration booth and the signage and the whatever markings on the floor. And like I'm really looking forward to working with them to see how they help us.
Yeah, and there's some really innovative companies I've come across. I mean, Wondermaker for a number of years has had some great installations where you can be touchless. You have Twitter to a vending machine, and it spits out a sample for you. So it's an amazing innovation. I know that X Events at London, Ontario is doing some really cool stuff as well, because it's going to be a challenge. As Jennifer is pointing out in the questions, there's lost opportunities moving to virtual, and so it requires some creativity there. But even in live, I don't know how many people are actually going to walk up and take something from somebody at a booth. I was actually at a grocery store last week, and they had a sample person out front of the grocery store handing out samples, and nobody would go near the person. And it's just, kind of, was it ill-timed, or was somebody being pretty hopeful? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's probably a little early to start doing sampling.
I think so.
Probably about a year early, or a year and a half.
Yeah.
So have you remodeled I know you've got the big travel show in January. Have you remodeled what your booths are going to look like, or how that engagement's going to look, Brent?
We with Go West, we haven't actually made this announcement yet, but Go West was scheduled for the end of January, and we actually are moving it to the May 1st to 3rd. We're just trying to nail down the details. So everybody on the call, that's information nobody knows yet. So you're the first to hear that. But yeah, May 1st to 3rd, Go West will be happening in Edmonton. When we look at our trade show, because there's a convention part of it, then there's the trade show. And the trade show, we have about 80 exhibitors that come in. And, we had a pretty wide floor plan to begin with, like really open concept. I think the biggest impact that it's going to make on that portion of our event is really around the sponsor activations, or the booth activations. And like we require every booth exhibitor to have some sort of activation. And when I say activation, that's not branded pens. We're talking about gamification, very unique food items, those types of things. And yes, it's going to significantly change that if in May, we're still at the same place that we are right now. I'm hoping that we aren't, that there will be more, that we will be allowed to do more, and that people are confident. They have to be confident that, like you said, the food example, handing out, like no one's going to take it out of store right now, any kind of sampling, because they're not confident and it's no trust there because of where we're at right now. So I'm hoping by May that that will change. But even so, long term, when you look at trade shows, and exhibitors, is it going to affect, what we do in these booths, and how, like, if we serve food, can we still do food and serve it in a different way? Or is it going to absolutely eliminate that? Because it will put a little bit of a damper on us if we can't do the activations to the same degree that we've done in the past.
The other thing I think that you'll notice in a trade show is how you have your rows, and so, or creativity, however you lay out your floor plan, but people would just go back and forth between here to the right, to the left. Now it's one direction one way and another direction coming back the other way, and you have to crowd control. So it's more like an assembly line of people walking past versus just the freedom of flowing back and forth. That's also going to have a different feel to the experience.
Yeah, and is that different feel going to be detrimental to the effectiveness of that event and the experience that those attendees have? Because yeah, it does make you kind of feel more like cattle being corralled. You're walking through this, up these aisles in one direction. Well, that's what I feel like in the grocery stores and the Home Depots when you've got these arrows and you have to enter on the one aisle and follow the crowd through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it'll be a different.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in regards to trade shows too, it's square footage is, my concern is square footage. Like I said, with Go West, we've got a pretty broad or pretty low density because we're pretty spread out. I think we actually have I think it was worked out to about 9 square feet per person that's in the room, if I could recall correctly. But like if we have to start engaging more space, there's an added cost to that. So where does that money come from?
Exactly.
And that's all up in the air right now. The uncertainty of everything coupled in with this, with them trying to budget, like how do we move forward? We just have to take it one day at a time.
Yeah, there's been some interesting stuff. I've been following a guy by the name of Frank Yang out of Korea, who runs some really large scale trade shows, traditionally, 80, 100,000 people. And he came back on pretty quickly because at this Korea, they really tightened up fast, that he was able to start hosting some trade shows end of May, beginning of June. And they had an expectation that this 120,000 person convention was going to have maybe 25,000 people, and they ended up with 40,000 people coming. So he's been documenting all the challenges he's had around, ensuring PPE, ensuring COVID safety, but then additionally, what other opportunities have popped up for his sponsors. So now he's got, the thermometer station is one thing, doing some additional elements in the line for branding. So it's kind of trying to imply that or apply that creativity to the space.
Well, we've got less people throughout the same amount of space that we typically would use. So, I think there's a lot, there's a lot less impressions for sponsorship, but at the same time, brands are more visible. So I guess just how does that balance out? Does it balance out well?
And I guess, if you don't want to be logo soup, then it gives you a great opportunity to engage with the people who are there. The question is, are you able to charge a premium for it? And I don't know if that's the case currently.
And how do sponsors measure their return on investment? We have less attendees and the cost is higher in some cases. So there's that they have to take a look at as well. And they have to make some pretty serious decisions as to what they can and cannot sponsor. So I'm certainly sure that as sponsors are starting to take a look at their yearly contributions towards events and where they're going to brand themselves, I would hazard a guess it's probably looked at through a finer lens than maybe it has been in years.
Yeah, and I think you have some of the challenges around sponsorship in general that I've seen, and some discussions I've had with a number of people, is the move to digital. The challenge for sponsorship is, could somebody go out as a brand and buy your audience via Facebook or Google AdWords? And they could buy that audience, send their messaging out to that audience if they're just going to send an ad or have visual display for far cheaper than it would be for the sponsorship. So I think the onus is on people who are looking for sponsors to know their audience, know who's going to be there, be able to share that out more distinctly to brands, to be able to identify, here's why I'm more valuable than a Facebook ad. because I think there is such value in sponsorship, being able to talk to somebody when they're willing to receive the conversation, as opposed to just seeing an ad in your Facebook feed. But that is your competition when it's $30 per 1,000 reach in Facebook, or you're charging somebody $30,000 to reach 1,000 people at a conference. The brands are definitely going to be looking at that comparison.
Yeah, that's I think that's the struggle with sponsorship when you got a fully hybrid event, and I think but that also highlights the value in face-to-face events for sponsors, because really you need that that brand recognition and visibility on site, but you also need you need that community or that connection with the people right there on site. Because you're right, like you could spend, if someone gives me $5,000 to sponsor our event, like they're there on site, they're connecting. But that 5,000 on a virtual only event, you're right about the Facebook thing, because you can narrow down your audience so specifically in Facebook and LinkedIn and other social media that you could 5,000 goes a long ways.
And I think, as Jennifer's saying, the sponsors get better results at virtual events than in person. But I think a lot of that's got to do with tracking. The fact that you've already got their contact information, there's ways to retarget them that you just can't when people are wandering through your event. So you have to showcase that value.
Well, analytics are, I think, a big bonus on virtual. That's a little harder to gauge in a live event. So you can walk away from a virtual event as a sponsor with a lot more intel than, actually being face-to-face with somebody and shaking their hand. So I think I think it's hard to compare, because they're very different. Each one gives you something different. Maybe the future in our world now is a blend of, here I have X amount of money in my sponsorship budget for XYZ organization. So rather than supporting 2 of their live events, I'll be at 1 live event and I'll do 2 virtual events. Or so they'll take the dollars and just split them up differently, I think, in the future. I think it's still I don't know, no crystal ball, but I think we're a good year or more away before you'll see life really get more back to face-to-face versus virtual. And I think there's an awful lot of people out there who are still nervous and are waiting for for any kind of vaccine before they're prepared to actually be in a group of people in an environment like what we used to have in the past.
Beth jumped in for a question for you, Brent. Just curious, the sponsors you're having signing on, are you entering into new clauses to deal with the cancellation or postponements?
Yeah, because that's obviously very dependent upon the sponsor. So yeah, you need to be very clear on whether what's going to happen if this event is postponed or canceled. Obviously, a cancellation, like you can't. There's got to be there's going to be some sort of refund happening or not carrying through with that sponsorship. But for the postponement, we just need to be clear. And I think that's with our contracts, we're trying to be very clear on it, making sure that the sponsor, that we can understand, have those conversations with the sponsors, know what they're, what they want to see happen in both those scenarios, and just making sure that text in the contract reflects that. I hope that answers your question. Or I don't know if you're looking for specific contract language.
And I think the challenge becomes, is it an existing contract or a new contract? I know with a lot of sponsors I'm working with on some events where there's been cancellations or shifts, it's having the conversation internally about how can we move them around. So providing a roster of options rather than just being, okay, we're going to refund you. Sponsor bank is a term I've used quite a bit over the last 6 months, that is just, okay, you're invested in the organization, let's put this here and then find different activities that we can apply. So a little bit different if you've got an organization that runs events through the year versus one event each year. But there's ways to make it work.
You got to be cognizant of the sponsors too, and because they might have funds this fiscal year, that they're putting towards your event, and if your event gets moved into their next fiscal year, are they allowed to move, like, to let you retain that funds, or does that have to come back? And like, it's really like, it's just like, it's so unique for each sponsor, but just having that conversation. I've had even people, that are, I think understanding, there's people out there that are just, asking questions. I know about, what we should do with our sponsor. Should I approach them? Should I not? Just get out there and approach your sponsors and have that conversation with them. Find out how they're doing, where they're at, what they can do, what they can't do. Tell, what happens if your event gets canceled? What happens if it gets postponed? And then just build the contract around that.
And knowing that 40% of planning for next year is all being done this month and next month, that if you're not having the conversations with them now, you're probably not top of mind. And if people are actually seeing the conversations that have been going on, that there could be as much of as 50 to 60% cut in sponsorship budgets, it's going to be a little bit more fierce. And then, I think Beth is just doing a call out. If anybody's got clauses they've been using, she shared her email there, and happy to share that. And then in the follow-up tomorrow, Beth, we'll have Brent's contact information, Beth's and mine, for additional follow-ups. But thinking about just looking at policy changes and legal protection. Rita, you and I have been having back and forth about waivers. So, what's been your experience so far in trying to do that planning?
The waivers that we're using at one of my clients now is so one-time waiver that holds the organization protected against any events that they do. So it's a one-time, you sign this waiver, it's filed away, and so any events that they do over the course of the full year, it covers them. So they don't have to sign a waiver every time that they come to an event. But what they do have to do is there is a survey that they have to submit or fill out when they arrive, and it's time sensitive because it's about how you're feeling, and are you ill? Do you have any coughs? Any of the physical symptoms, and that can't be pre-populated. It has to be completed at the time of the event. Signed, and then their contact information attached to it, so it's contact tracing. And those two forms are critical for this particular organization in moving forward with any of their events. They also are providing a copy of their insurance policies for every event venue that we go into, so that the insurance is also protecting everyone that's there. So they're taking maybe the extreme side of protection, but I think that's a very wise way of doing it. Very happy to share if anyone would like to see any of the information that we've been working with this. I've been working with a lawyer these last few days to put together this type of information so that we would be very well protected moving forward. So happy to share. If anyone is interested, just let me know.
And we were talking, privacy the other day, and just, all the elements about covering the organization, taking this information from a privacy perspective. And I was pointing out that I've heard of at least one organization, and I know a number of restaurants here in Ontario that are utilizing the COVID app. So rather than taking people's names and numbers and all those privacy elements, they're just saying, okay, you have to show that you've got the COVID app on your phone, and being able to utilize that. So it's really kind of a CYA from their end.
The challenge with the COVID app is that not every province has it. So if you're doing work across the country like I am, it works in Ontario, but there are other provinces that don't have it yet. They're still working on it. So it can only protect you in some jurisdictions and not all.
And that's true, because, I see Jennifer just asked that question, will COVID app work for live events? And, it really is dependent upon where your audience is coming from. Is it coming, if we're holding an event just in Alberta, or people coming from across Canada, the United States, and, so I think that could be a challenge. but also too, you've got people that just absolutely are adamant that they're not putting that app on their phone or their device, just because they don't want to be tracked. And like, so yeah, drawing that line, that's tough.
Mm-hmm. And it's only as effective.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's only as effective as the people who populate it.
Correct. Yeah. So maybe the goal would be is to get 70 or 80% of the people actually using it.
Mm-hmm.
But mandating that you have to have it on your device, first thought I'm thinking that's great, that's awesome, But at the second thought I'm like, well, that's going to deter people from registering. And I don't know about you, but we're the amount of loss that we've seen over the last 6 months. I'm open to registration. I want to open to getting people through the door and registered,
Mm-hmm.
and then doing everything that's possible to guarantee their safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. And especially since you're limited to 100 people in Alberta, we're limited to 50 here in Ontario indoors. So, that's not a lot of people. So you want to try to at least get the 50 and 100 if you can.
Yeah, and I think, Jennifer, you're looking at other ideas. Would a QR code work? I mean, I think any element where you're capturing the information of who's in the room is going to be pretty important. It just becomes covering your privacy elements. And that's where some people were looking at the COVID app as a way of not having to have that exposure for capturing anybody's personal information. I guess, looking at some of the technology you've been implementing for the change in live events, has there been new things that you've brought on board? I know, Rita, you're looking at a hybrid event, so you've got both elements of running the virtual and the live, but even within the live events, are there different things you're doing?
Well, I haven't run a live one yet. I'm living in a virtual world right now. Just about to embark on, like I said, some hybrids and then some live. But maybe Brent, with your AV side of the business, have you seen anything that to reference what Brad's speaking about?
Yeah, I think. Are you talking just, Brad? Or are you just referring to what types of software for doing live or hybrid events?
I think a combination of that. It was a question that was put out in advance by one of the people signed up.
Yeah. So
was it just looking at, are there different technology elements? So, I mean, I guess if you're changing the shape of the room, or things you need to bring in to make it safer.
Yeah. I'll tell you, hybrid is very popular right now, especially here in Edmonton. It is. And with having that face-to-face, I find it with associations, unions, and anybody that has to have an annual AGM, or even corporate when they do their annual AGM, is they're doing this on-site, face-to-face, and then that's being connected or connecting in a virtual audience to that. And the most popular tool, if people aren't familiar, well, we all know Zoom, but Zoom Pro with Zoom webinars. Check that out. It's probably one of the most cost-effective. When you start getting into virtual software, that's where it's integration of multiple components of all the different aspects, right from registration right through the whole process to evaluation. There's I can't even begin to name off software. They're easy to find. There's so many of them. They're just hundreds, and the only thing on them is they generally are expensive. I've done a little checking on pricing and etc. And they start at about $6,000 US, and go up from there. But and also keep in mind, you're just buying the use of the software. You got to still do all the stuff in behind, like all your production management and setting up and configuration, and it's a costly approach. But Zoom by far is the tool that we're using extensively right now. And also webcasting, traditional webcasting,
mm-hmm.
when you don't need that two-way conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And hybrid is the direction to go, I think, with at this point in time. So if Ontario's got 50-person capacity, then do a 50-person capacity room and connect everybody else in virtually.
Mm-hmm. And I think hybrid will be around for a few years. I think it's the bridge between the virtual world and some ability to be face to face, yet to satisfy a large audience. So there's a great sponsorship opportunity, because they can implement both the one-on-one interaction with the people, a number of people are allowed to be at the venue, but also they can have their brand streamed to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. So there is a great sponsorship opportunity in a hybrid, I think, for sponsors.
I was talking with a guy yesterday who runs a line management software. It's pretty inexpensive, and he's got it set up for the COVID testing centers, so that people can live view the way the line looks, and then on the flip side, from the testing centers, they can see where their hot spots are in line and how people are congregating and how they need to space out differently. And he's been looking at it for live events to figure out if you've got a trade show and you want to manage the 100 people that you're only allowed to have in the space, how you can help manage that line outside so people time it differently. They're not all showing up at 8 a.m. when it opens and realizing that there's 200 people in line. So it's some interesting technology. It's a matter of figuring out how to monetize it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've been chatting with Michael Harker from Enigma Research a fair bit. And he's been doing some great research, particularly in the US, looking at events that have reopened. So looking at Disney, looking at Six Flags, looking at the Fremont experience in Las Vegas, the Pier in Navy Pier in Chicago. And there's been really positive response to people wanting to come back and be at live events. Have you had much engagement with people signing up here and their responses, whether it's different from what the US experience is?
I'd say we're more conservative here in Canada than they are in the United States. And so I think there's a little bit more hesitation. That's what I'm experiencing anyway, a little more hesitation on our side of the border here to jump into going to events, social events like that. I don't know, Brent, you notice the same thing? This is what I see in Ontario.
Well, yeah. I guess we can only really speak to the area that we're living in, and it's been experienced this last 5 months. And I find, looking at, well, as I said earlier, with Western Sponsorship, like we're pacing the same as we have in previous years for how far we're out. So, are people wanting to come to live events? Yes, but you got to look beyond the live events. The malls are full. Costco's full, the airlines are packing people in, and people are going and doing this. And so it tells me that, yes, there's people out there that are concerned, but there's a large segment of the population that aren't. And I tend to believe that people are looking to get back to face-to-face, especially on the business side of things. Holding a concert right now probably won't work. Well, outside of these drive-in ones that are popular right now, because I believe Live Nation's doing them right across Canada at the moment. But when you get into social events, not so much. But when you get into business events, yes, the business events are happening. They have to happen. You need business events for the economy to actually function and move forward. So are people wanting to do business events? Yes. And I think sponsorship marketing falls within that realm too. Like, that has to happen. Businesses need to market. They need to hold meetings. They got to do this to make things to move forward, for their business to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And there are those elements where it's saying, if you market through a recession and you're able to do it, you come out stronger at the end. So if you're able to provide those conduits for brands. And I had watched Coke through 2008 and SARS when it happened in Toronto, and how much additional advertising they did, and they did really well from it. And they were doing the exact opposite this year. And it was really trying to dig into why that was. So it's getting to understand the sponsor and what their business is looking like. Because once I found out that Coke's business dropped 75% because of their reliance on sports venues, entertainment venues, and restaurants. That their consumption just went down huge. So going out and having those asks for sponsors, you've got to time it right.
You look at this past 5 months, and just look at people and their retail spending. Like everybody I talked to, on the retail side said everything's through the roof. Like the amount of money that people are spending on products, and or the amount of product or amount that they're consuming. So if people are consuming more, then that's got to translate into more opportunity for sponsorship inherently.
I don't know what it's like in Alberta, but Ontario, for the last month, if you try and find pressure treated wood, you cannot find it in any of the hardware stores.
That's right.
You can't buy anything here right now in Alberta. Like, it's just everything in every segment of life. Like the summer was huge. Like someone had indicated, whether the stats right or not, said like just RV sales were up 75% compared to previous years. And I've heard that same story across everything. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, then all those brands are, they're getting, there's more money that they're bringing through the door, and which, and they translate that automatically into sponsorship because
mm-hmm.
they can put that brand back in front of people and sell even more.
Mm-hmm. Well, now there's a rush on outdoor heaters so that people can keep the numbers up and stay outside. So if you need an outdoor heater to sit outside in the fall, again, like your venues, you need to get one pretty soon. They're going to be gone.
I'm kind of rooting for toilet paper again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, kind of tying into what you were saying there a minute ago, Brent, is, people want to get the message out there, and they've got to do business, and this is a fantastic way for them to get engaged, and it's being able to offer the right message. Because definitely, if you follow the path through, and there was a lot of we're here for you going on March, April, May, and now people are trying to reposition to say, okay, we're doing more, and definitely consumers are going, okay, yeah, you're here for me, that's nice, but what else are you doing? So if you can then expand their brand message and tie it into where they're growing, I think you'll do well.
Yeah, and tie it more into recovery. So I guess they've changed from being, hey, we're here for you to support you, to hey, now we're here to help you recover. So I think that's the transition that's been made.
And one of the questions we got was just around smaller community business sponsorships, and I think that's a mixed challenge, because the small business has definitely been hit. But it's finding the right businesses who are doing well. So it requires a bit of research to dig that up, see who's positioned financially well and is open to the conversations. We do a fair bit of work with Judy Haber from Performance Sponsorship Group, and she's doing tons of municipal sponsorship. And the number of deals and the size of the deals that she's closed throughout COVID has been amazing. Like, I was shocked to hear some of the numbers, but it was all doing that background research and understanding, okay, this one business is doing so well in the community, and they want to share back and share that wealth.
There's a big difference between large centers, the major cities within Canada, versus small towns, small communities. I'm from a small town, grew up on a farm. My relatives or family still out there, and you go out to that county, and I think they've had 3 cases since March, and honestly, it's like COVID doesn't exist when you're out there. It's business as usual. So I really don't see businesses hurting.
Yeah, and I think
big centers where they are.
Even if you're in a big center, you can start doing some plays where it's maybe you give away this year for free to confirm next year in order to get that advance confirmation. So there's some negotiating I think people can put themselves in.
Well, who was it that said that you should never waste a good crisis?
Yeah, very true. Excellent. Well, we're coming up on the hour. Rita and Brent, thank you so much for for sharing your insights and expertise. It was great to have you on. Thanks everybody for joining the call, and we'll send out a follow-up tomorrow, and I'll share Brent and Rita's contact information, assuming you guys are okay with it, should anybody have some additional questions for them. And then our next session is coming up on September 23rd with Invest Ottawa, RBC, and Logan Katz talking about economic development and entrepreneurial investment and sponsorship. So look forward to having everybody there, and thanks again to Rita and Brent.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
All right.
Yes. Thanks, everybody. Take
Bye,
care.
guys.